Hello and welcome back to the Book, Business, and Brand Building Summit. Here we are on actually the final live interview of the summit. Not the final presentation. You'll have to wait for tomorrow for my closing keynote. But this marks the end of kind of a marathon journey that we've been on. And I know from the emails I've been getting from you, the messages, any channel, you name it, people are saying that this summit has really moved the needle for them, for you. That's why we're doing it. That's why we're putting it on. So today, on this final live interview, before we close the summit down tomorrow, I'm excited to bring somebody out from sort of behind the scenes. In addition to being a multi-time author, in addition to having a publishing focused business, in addition to working with some of the biggest names in the industry on their book launches and product launches, this man that I'm about to introduce to you has also been my joint venture partner manager. So he's been working furiously behind the scenes with the upwards of 50 people that have helped support this event, bring people like yourself here so that we can do these interviews and these trainings. So with no further ado, let me pull back the curtain and share with you Tom Morkes. Tom, how you doing?
Jesse, thank you so much for the introduction, man. It's awesome to be here. Pumped. That is the final interview and ready to take it to the next level here.
Absolutely, man. And look, I know that wasn't the normal introduction that you probably get coming into an event like this, but look, Tom he was also the person behind the Authority Super Summit. If you saw that recently, broke a Guinness Book of World Records for the longest contiguous on-air broadcast. How long was that? Like 4 days or something?
Yeah, well, I think it was 3 days. It was like, I think we broke it at like 50 or 60 hours or something like that.
Yeah, and in the midst of that, doing work with authors on book launches, been prepping with myself and our team for months and months for this event. Tom has his hands in many different aspects of this online business, online publishing, book-related, entrepreneur-related space. So it's really an honor to bring you out from your capacity of joint venture partner manager and really just get to focus on you and your work here. So maybe from your own perspective, Tom, how would you describe what you do? If somebody is just getting to know you, perhaps at a business event or something, and says, what are you all about? What's Insurgent Publishing all about?
Yeah, I'd say the cornerstone of what we do is strategic book and product launches. So we work with obviously great people like you, Jesse, on events like this, on digital courses, on membership sites and things like that. That's probably about 50% of what we do. And the other 50% is actually doing that for book-related projects. So we just launched Ash Maurya's Scaling Lean, hit #2 on the Wall Street Journal bestseller list, which is really cool. We're working with Neil Patel, so hoping to hit like #1 on New York Times if we can make it happen. So relatively big players in the game there, but also with self-publishers who are relatively established in the blogging and podcasting spheres, like Dan Norris of WP Curve and other people just like that. So that's kind of what we do in a nutshell. And happy to elaborate on any part of that. But if people are wondering, what do I do? It's basically what we do is we amplify book and product launches by recruiting affiliates, by recruiting people to promote, by lining up blog and guest posts and podcast interviews and any kind of outward, press that we can get to drive people to whatever it is that we're promoting.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely going to dive into that because, of course, the focus of this presentation, the focus of today is, as an author, how do you sell those first 10,000 copies of your book? And, as Tom's describing what he does, and in his own words, behind the scene, it's an important moment for you all that are watching these broadcasts, watching these trainings, to realize that this is a team effort. I mean, if you're going to do a big book launch, if you're going to do an online training program launch, if you're going to do a summit like this, get it out of your head that you've got to do this all yourself. It's not realistic. And in fact, it takes a team of experts, usually coordinated with somebody like Tom, to really make something go off and have the impact that, of course, those of you watching this want to have. So on that note, Tom, what does go into a book launch of the size and scale that you're working on? Maybe you can take us through that. I think it'd be very instructive.
For sure. So I'll take you guys through this. I think there's maybe like 12 or 14 steps that we like really go through. And so I'll just kind of walk through that, and that'll be in the context of the launch. And then what I want to do is to maybe, if we have time, talk about what happens post-launch. Like, how do we get to that next level? How do we hit those next numbers? Because everybody, I know we focus on the launch, obviously, but especially when it comes to books, what we care about is the first 12 months, because you can do some good stuff out of the gate, but the real, magic happens if you can get things locked down tight from a long tail marketing standpoint to generate sales ongoing. And then that's the real magic, versus say just like a one-time blip on the radar and then you disappear forever. So I'll talk how we set up the launches, and then kind of dig into how we continue to market and promote books to generate. Usually what we try to do is 10,000 or more copies a year. The reality is that puts it in like the top 5% or 10% of book sales in a year, but I think probably top 5 if you hit 20,000 euro in like the top 1% of books. So the reality is hitting 10,000 in a year is really, really good for anybody who's self-published or traditionally published. Honestly, like it's a competitive world out there, but there's a lot of books. There's so many books out there that just don't sell. So I'll just start at the basics. So when we're setting up our launch, we want to start by focusing on setting up whatever our goals are, like defining whatever those goals are, defining what that outcome is, and being really clear on kind of dates and timelines. And that's where it all begins. So whether it's a launch like this or whether it's a book launch, you have to have a ship date. So defining that, because that's where you start by backward planning everything and figuring out what are all the things that we have to hit. So in the context of things that we have to hit, this is where I kind of number these off. So we'll say that's number one, is kind of getting things situated on timeline, on your goal, on your objective, and when you want to ship. Step 2 is identifying key players. And this is, make or break a big launch, really. You want to define who it is in your space, in your niche, who are bloggers, podcasters, curators, media personalities, anybody out there who's relevant to the book that you're creating, who could speak about it, who could share it, where it would be appropriate for their audience. So this is what I mean by key players, and identifying who are the people that are going to be the people that you want to actually be reaching out to. At that point, then we want to actually move into developing what I call an early notification list. So we've defined maybe a few hundred channels of these influencers. Let's call them influencers. So those are the key players, influencers. So we want to get as many that are relevant, and we want to put those into a list. Then we want to putting together an early notification list. This is where you prep all the materials in and around your book, but specifically an opt-in page. So you can put your book out there early and actually do one of two things: either start getting pre-orders or start getting opt-ins for the book. I like to do the opt-ins thing, and that's most of the time, 99% of the time what we do is we usually have some sort of page that's set up so people can sign up for the book, not get access right away, but sign up to be notified of when the book comes out. And we can talk about a little, like some kind of cool techniques you can apply there to generate like interest in that and getting people to sign up. Because if you just
I'd love you to lay out just like the whole structure, because I know people watching this, people tuning in to the summit, just want to know, like, how does it actually work to go from, okay, you got your book, effectively done. How do you take it all the way through to launch and then continue to drive those sales? Then we can dive into some of the specific tips and tricks around the components of that model.
Perfect. So we've defined who the influencers are. We've set up our early notification page. We know what our dates and times and goals are. Then what we want to do is actually put together what I call an ambassador group or a street team. And it's usually some group of people who are usually your biggest fans. So there's some kind of assumption here that you have maybe even a little bit of a platform. And even if you don't, you could probably recruit friends and family to be a part of this. But you want to get people who will actually come out the gate as your champion. So you want to put that together in a list. So you almost really care about kind of three main lists or three groups of people that you want to be aware of: influencers, early notification. These are people who will be signing up to your book early, and ambassadors. And the ambassadors are the people you're going to use and ask to basically share, review, and promote on launch day. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to do that launch day, launch week, launch, the full year, and leverage ambassadors the right way. So those are the key components. After that, we want to define what are marketing channels we're looking at. So a marketing and sales channel are kind of interchangeable, but a lot of people think, well, I'm going to put my book on Amazon and that's my marketing channel. But in reality, Amazon is not a good marketing channel at all, because you're not going to be found on Amazon organically. is to some degree what you can do with SEO. You can generate some kind of organic traffic. It's true. But the majority of sales in any project we've worked on have come from traffic coming into Amazon. So a marketing channel is that way that you reach your potential customer. And this is the big hang up for a lot of self-publishers is they don't know how to actually get people to come to the page. And they say, well, I've marketed, I've put stuff on social media, I have my book on Amazon. And social media is a little bit better of a marketing channel potentially. But as you and I know, Jesse, things like Twitter don't really move the needle for anything. So like when people say, oh, my marketing channels, I shared this on Twitter with 100 of my followers. You'd be lucky to get one person maybe to click through and buy, to be honest. So you want to think through marketing channels. So marketing channels, how do you reach your audience? And here's the deal. This is where I think it's very easy to understand for nonfiction. It's more confusing and more difficult for fiction. So I'll talk about nonfiction here real quick and then kind of see how we can kind of get a little creative with fiction. So with nonfiction, it's a matter of what is the topic of the book? What are the themes of the book? What is the content? And in nonfiction, especially in the space we're in, Jesse, it's often stuff that we're teaching. It's like nonfiction, maybe it's a business book, it's a marketing book, it's a how-to book. And usually it's pretty clear what space you're in. So if it's like a real estate investing book, well, this is going to be applicable to people who are interested in real estate. Well, who's interested in real estate investing? Well, maybe there's forums out there. Maybe there are like certain networking groups that are out there. Maybe there are Facebook groups that are out there. Maybe there's a Reddit channel that's really into it. Maybe there's X, Y, and Z. And you start going through and you want to iterate, you want to essentially write down every potential marketing channel of a way where and the marketing channels, where is your audience? The person who you've defined as being interested in your book. So I guess if I were to take a step back, sorry, I kind of skipped over that piece, was make sure you understand who that target market is, who that target readership is. I guess I take that as an assumption that you are very clear and focused on who it is you're writing for.
Yeah, let's assume that that's the case now, because let's look at the launch mechanics and the structure and really the process piece around this, because a lot of people have covered touched on that for sure.
Okay, perfect. So with those assumptions in mind, that who you're trying to access, then it's a matter of putting it together. Put it on a list, write it out, just like with your influencers list, just like with maybe your ambassador group. It doesn't hurt to write this stuff out or start a list. Definitely for influencers, definitely for marketing channels. And then what you want to do is actually think through how you're going to approach each one of those when the time comes. So you want to be thinking, how do I approach this channel in a way that's actually useful? Like, how do I get traffic from it? So a lot of people come at this and just essentially spam, or they'll come out there and just like do these blasts. Like they'll get on and be like, hey, my book is live, go buy it. Or, Reddit, like, hey, buy my book. And what you'll find is that stuff techniques doesn't really, blasting on Facebook, blasting on social media channels doesn't really work. So what way more effective, but a lot more difficult to kind of prep for, and why it helps to have like some time to do this and actually start doing it early, is building some sort of rapport with the people that are in these groups and in these kind of what you've defined as marketing channels. So like if it's a Reddit group, getting active in it early before you need it. If it's a Facebook group, getting active in it before you need it. And all this stuff is stuff that you have to think through, and it does take time. It takes a little bit of effort and energy, but it's going to you'll reap the rewards more greatly. Whereas honestly, last on these groups, you could get banned, you could get kicked out, you could get, deleted, and then it's not effective at all. And so the reality is a lot of work goes in pre-launch to actually start building the relationships you need in these groups, in these forums, and in this space before you can actually drip out and share the book you're trying to sell. So it's a lot of work in the beginning. And then we go into kind of, once we have those things identified, kind of going back, and there's an iterative process here of now starting to see what you can do as you build the relationships in these groups, start to engage in those groups, to see what you can do in terms of like pre-launch, maybe send them to your early notification page, which is, in most cases, to define this, I usually use the sales page. So create a book sales page on your website, and before it goes live, just have an opt-in. Say opt-in to receive the book or get notified when the book goes live. So that's an example. So I will go ahead.
And of course, everybody has the option to use the book sales page template that we all created for you and shared with you at the beginning of before the summit even started. Great way to accomplish this important point that Tom's speaking to.
Yeah, I love it. And that template is it's a great example of a great sales page, and great as an early notification list. Even if you don't have all the content ready, you can just cut out the pieces you don't need for now and then expand on it later. But you really want some thing up early. You definitely want a sales page up before you actually go to launch for that purpose. So you can start directing people to it. People can start opting in to hear about the book before it goes live. And then, again, then when you open up and the book does go live, you have this audience already built up. You have this list of people who are already interested. When you put it out, when you talk about it this way, it kind of seems like a no-brainer, but you'd be surprised how many people, I think, fail to do this, don't even think about doing it. They just get a book and then they put it out there and then they try to start promoting that. By then it's actually too late. So you really want to focus on how do you start building that early notification list. And we'll talk about investors in a second and influencers in just a second here too. But that's the thing. If you can start planting the seed, you can do things like adding a PS to your email signature. You can start putting it to the forefront site. Have a little pop-up that says, hey, have you heard about my new book? Click here to get first access to it when it happens. You can start putting it on all your different social media channels, referencing the book and linking to this early notification page. If you have a newsletter, which you probably should, I'm sure other people have talked about that during this event probably multiple times, you want to, at the very least, maybe start doing a PS. I'm working on my new book. Here's what it's about. Or, hey, have you had a chance to sign up for the early notification list? Or, hey, just a reminder, this is coming live soon. Even if it's just a PS or something like that. You don't have to do hard pushing of your book early, but you want to get it in, you want to drip out reminders of the book that is coming. You want to let people know it's coming. And this is, you can see this in any major product launch. And the most famous, I guess, would be like Apple or like Tesla. You know what I mean? And yeah, these are tech products, but you realize in a very small way, your book can have that kind of energy. And there's definitely authors that are relatively, bigger, where people do really pay attention to those books, but you realize you don't need to be one of those big time authors to generate a lot of interest from your core group of interested readers of your audience. So just because you're not a big player doesn't matter. You can still get people interested in your book, and you should treat it that way. Like when Tesla releases something, people know when that press conference is coming. They know, they're aware of it, because Tesla isn't just keeping it behind closed doors. They're letting them know. They tease. So tease people, tease your audience about the book, and give them reason to be excited about it. So as we do that, I want to shift back to the influencers, because you're kind of doing these things simultaneously as you go forward. But with influencers, you want to then, after you build that list out, you actually want to start reaching out to them. So just like I said, marketing channels, we talk about, maybe engaging on those platforms, talking, building rapport. You need to do the same thing with influencers. And this you usually would probably be worthwhile if you started a couple of years ago, but it's kind of like planting a tree. The best time is now, right? If you hadn't done it before, the best time is now. So to start as early as possible today, to just connect with potential influencers in your space, to build relationships, build rapport. And a quick asterisk, we can go into much more detail about this. This is the biggest thing that we do for our launches, the biggest thing we do for book launches. It's the biggest thing we do just for at Insurgent Publishing is honestly, it's a big piece of just relationship building. And it's saying, how do I find and connect with people and help provide value to them, to their platforms? And you'd be surprised, it's not the hardest thing in the world. You usually looking for is, how do you add value to them? And oftentimes it's relatively clear. Maybe they're looking for more press, so sharing their article is good. Maybe they're looking for maybe just a simple review on their podcast is a great way to kind of give first. So sharing their articles on social media, reviews, doing something for them first before you ever ask for anything, and then maybe letting them know about it. So if you leave a review for some influencer, maybe send them an email and say, hey, love your podcast, left a review. Just want to let you know. And
I'll just jump in on that point for a second, that, what you're mentioning here, Tom, is so important. And that in the grand scheme of things, in the overall arc of your book launch, we're in the pregame of, really identifying and getting into contact with the people that can help move the needle for your launch. And I just will underscore your point there of the bigger somebody is, the more demands they have on their time, the less attention you can expect if you're coming in sort of cold. So a great way to start to build that relationship value is doing something that's additive to what they're currently focused on in business. And, just a quick example that's super relevant today, just a few hours ago when I was interviewing Jason Van Orden, I didn't really know him before. I hadn't been on Internet Business Mastery podcast. Of course, I know who he is. Maybe he knew who I was. When I reached out to him and invited him on the summit, we had a little chat back and forth, and it came out that he was working on a book and that he wanted to go a traditional publishing route. Boom. I saw my opportunity and I introduced him to the president of Morgan James Publishing, who published my book. Yeah, I run a publishing company, but that wasn't going to be my pitch, because I'm inviting him onto the summit. That was my objective. Just like in this case, what Tom's describing, your book launch and your business development is your objective. So how can you play into those influencers' personal goals in a way that adds value to them? And I know something like that, it only took a few minutes for me to make the introduction, but then following up afterwards. And now by the time we actually get to do the thing that I had in mind for us, we've built some rapport, we've built some relationship value. And I encourage you to take that similar approach with the other key influencers that you're going to want to bring in for your book launch.
So powerful. And I love that example. It's like, if you can be a connector, it's like the easiest way to add value, but it has to be appropriate connections. You know, Jesse was listening, he heard, and he actually knew a guy that's good at what he does. That would actually be a great fit. It was an appropriate connection to make. But like that is, one of the single easiest ways to like build rapport with potential influencers is seeing what they need, who would be a useful connection, and seeing if they'd be interested in that connection. Because I'll tell you what, if somebody was like, hey, Tom, would you like to interview Seth Godin? I can connect you. I'd be like, yes, let's do it. You know, obviously maybe that's a higher end, but at the same time, I have people who come to me sometimes and will be like, is this person, would you like to connect with this person? He does X, Y, and Z, and it might be useful for your business. I'm always so grateful for that. Even if I turn it down, I'm super grateful that somebody actually thought of it. So it's like that's a, kind of a tangential point, but the idea of just like building value first, connecting with influencers, seeing what you can do to provide value for them, and not trying to be don't take at first. Don't take for a long time. Give as much as you can for as long as you can. And then every now and then when you need it, when you're really prepped and ready for it, then that's when you do your ask. And as an example for book launches, one of the ways to get people, as an example, as an influencer, is to get them like to tweet. But I'll tell you what, a tweet is not effective. For most accounts, as an example. So if you want an influencer to help you and you say, hey, would you share this? They'll probably go and they'll tweet it. And I'll be honest with you, like you're not going to get much traction from that. But if you had spent time maybe building rapport and were able to work it where it made sense for them, but to share it on their email list, you've gone from 1 to 100 in terms of like how valuable that is to you. Like if somebody's were to email about your book versus just tweet it. And so to get to that point, it's important that you're able to actually produce value. You create value for them and do that and then even then you're going to get people who will just say no to this stuff. Maybe if you've done it for months or years, people still say no. But if you give enough, you will find that there may be ways to get that bigger ask, that thing that's really going to move the needle, which in my opinion is email. And it's anybody who owns or manages maybe like large communities of people, anybody who isn't like a real connector, and then sharing it with their community. Like those are the big wins for a book. And that's what we focus on big time. With affiliate marketing, it's huge. Like it's the only way to do it is you have to get people to email, because social doesn't really move the needle. With book launches, it's the same deal. Working with John Lee Dumas, I think we had 100 and something. It was 100, I forget the stats, but we ended up getting over 100 people to email about the book. And now there are things to understand here. Like your platform is important. People don't want to email about something that would make them look bad. So the book has to be good. Your platform has to be legitimate. It has to be, a useful product for their audience. So there's a lot of factors here. But I'll tell you what, just understanding that little basic concept, just by getting people to email, we were able to do almost $500,000 in sales in 30 days for John for a Kickstarter campaign. And it's pretty incredible. That the power of that though came from emailing. It came from getting in front of other people's audiences. And that was the majority of our traffic. So just kind of an interesting point there when we talk about like emphasizing how we want influencers to help us out.
Yeah, well, I just want to bring attention to one of the points you made is like, sure, it's very important to build the relationship with these influencers. And ultimately, even though you shouldn't just have the agenda the whole time of you're building up to make an ask of them, but actually building a relationship. And yes, you will make a request to them. When you do make that request, like Tom said, it's got to be good, right? Don't lean on somebody else's authority and credibility to supplement if you haven't put in the work to have a good looking presentation for your book online, or if the actual product itself isn't good. That needs to be just like foundational, right? That's got to be done. It's got to look great. You have had to put in the time and energy. You're not going to get an additive effect if you do manage to get a big name person to promote for your book launch and then you don't deliver. It's going to be more of a one and done, and that can actually hurt you more than it can help. But just wanted to jump in on that point.
Oh, it's such a good point, and it's so true. Like, and that's kind of like almost like the tough thing. I feel like when I have these conversations with people, oftentimes they put so much effort into their book that like the last thing they want to do is like have to go and build a platform, and build a website or whatever platform might be defined as, but some sort of thing where they actually can have a real audience that pays attention to them. But it's that attention that is the most valuable thing in the world. It's attention and trust. And so if you're able to build that, like that's what really moves the needle going forward, because then you can make these asks and you're more credible. People will respect your name. People will be aware of you. And yeah, you might have to start at, the bottom, quote unquote. A lot of people look for that also, that Hail Mary pass, that I want, this person to share my book and everything will change. I want to be on Oprah. That's all I need. If this is on Oprah, then we're good to go. And the reality is, it's like, it's kind of lazy. It is lazy, not kind of lazy. It is lazy to approach it that way, that you need some sort of Hail Mary pass and to not put in the hard work. Like, guess what? Any other person who's successful has put in that hard work, whether you've seen it or not. They put in that hard work to build those relationships. They put in that hard work, the time and energy and like the sweat to like connect with people and make things happen. And it's true. Now, if you have money, a lot of money to start with, that can help move the needle a little faster. You can invest in the right things. You can make the right connections maybe a little faster, but there's still a certain like amount of energy that has to be put into kind of building your own platform as an author. And I know that's kind of tangential here, but it's important for any kind of launch and from a platform perspective that people begin to know you and your name, not just your book, but you and your name. That's the big thing. I mean, that's why sequels sell, that's why people, I won't go into it, but that's why, sequels are so powerful, because people know the name, they know, and the brand. And you as an author, it's tough. If you're playing the game of just trying to have like a bunch of books on Amazon, I don't know how well that's going to do for you, but focusing maybe on one book that's really core to your platform, maybe that's a better prerogative right now. Fiction authors is a little bit different. Volume is usually the direction they choose. I usually say it this way. You kind of have to choose your grind. And the grind can either be writing a lot and publishing a lot, which is usually the fiction crowd strategy, or the grind can be platform development. I don't think you should ignore it if you're a fiction author, but platform development and kind of the grind of marketing and selling a single book and kind of building out a platform around it. And either way,
sort of two different camps on the summit, really. And I'm happy to give airtime to both of them. But when you saw people like Steve Scott or Jonathan Green, these are like writers in this. Honoré Corder is another example. People that have over 10 books in the market and are generating the majority, if not a considerable amount of their income from book sales. That's one game. The other is, using your book as the foundational piece for your business and brand. And I think that's really where Tom's advice is going to do you the most benefit, because building those relationships, building the mind share in your space goes far beyond just the book that you're launching. And I think by now in the summit, you guys probably have gotten the inclination that even your book launch, if done right, is still just one part of the overall play of growing your business, your brand, your influence.
I love it. So at this point, we've covered kind of the main components of like what I'd call like maybe research and development phase of your launch. And then you kind of go into the pre-launch phase. And pre-launch is where you just make sure that everything's good to go. At this point, this might be a month out or something like that, give or take. And that's when you want to make sure that, the book's ready for distribution, it's ready for Amazon, it's ready for whatever platform you're going to produce it on, that you've actually, you have developed all the communication emails and communication messages, whether it's through Facebook or your email to your ambassador group, because you want to prep that. And we can talk a little bit about that during launch. I'll say what goes out to them, but you want to do all this stuff pre-launch. You don't want to be doing all this stuff during your launch week, trying to figure all this stuff out. You want to prep as much as you can before in the pre-launch. You want to go through and with a fine tooth comb and see is there anything missing here? Like, okay, I have some influencers lined up. I have podcast interviews lined up. I have a couple guest blogs lined up. I have my own editorial calendar that's going out, dripping out this content. What else? And you want to try to make sure, fine tooth comb, that thing makes sense, and then you understand, okay, this is what's going to happen day one when the book goes live. I'm going to, and this is kind of we'll go into the launch period. So the point is, in pre-launch, you want to make sure all the stuff that we'll talk about during launch week and beyond is already prepped. So now I'll quickly move from pre-launch into this, even though pre-launch is a much longer period of time, and talk about like launch week, where the book goes live for sale. So this is where we systematically, or at least like the system we developed around launches that has proven pretty successful, is we use kind of like an accelerated launch kind of structure or technique, where We usually do a soft launch on day one, and then we ramp it up, and then we ramp it up, and we ramp it up. And the soft launch being, we open it up, and guess who gets it? Ambassadors first, because they're the ones. And I guess I made this assumption that I didn't tell people. The thing about ambassadors is they agree. Usually, the best way to build an ambassador group is to get them to agree that they'll share and they'll review. And they'll be, maybe whatever else maybe you might ask of them, but those are the big things. Share and review the book when it comes out. And in exchange, usually, you give them access to you or something like that. It's the simplest way to build an ambassador group. So these are the people there. This is not a shock to them when the first day comes and you say, hey, the book is live. Can you please buy it or download it or whatever and leave a review? That's number one. And you want that day one because guess what? The more positive reviews you have day one, the more that's going to amplify everything else that happens the rest of the week. Get as many positive reviews day one as you can, without a doubt. And day two, that's when I open it up to my early notification list. Say, hey, you guys want to know about this book? Well, guess what? Here it is. Here's what people are already saying. Early reviews coming in. Now, all of a sudden, you're leveraging your ambassador reviews and to create social proof right from the start. And then that's day two. Then day three is when you start opening it up to your broader channel. That's when you probably email your main list. If you have say you have a separate early notification list, then you have a main list. That's how I do it. Because guess what? Everybody on your main list may not want to hear about your book. And if you can segment that, these are going to be the people who are super excited about it. And your early notification list, you can ask, hey, get it, download it, review it. And because you're segmenting them separately, you can approach them differently. And you can approach them like maybe a week or two later and say, hey, what did you think of the book? They signed up. They've been on this list for however many days or months. They care about it if they downloaded it. And so they're going to be very ripe to get a review from. And that's the key here. It's really getting really positive word of mouth going. And this is the best, most effective way to do it is reviews, getting a lot of positive reviews right off the bat. So then that third day, we're doing it to your main list. And maybe we're starting to do social. And we start putting it out on social. We drip it out to all our social platforms. Then day 4, 5, 6, this is when I look to do things like, and this is really applicable to nonfiction, and you have to get a little more creative with fiction, but things like Product Hunt, if it's appropriate. Product Hunt is one of the most engaged communities. And if you can build a bit of a following there, and you can kind of interact with other people's stuff and be a personality on that platform a little bit, that can move the needle in a very big way. It's especially appropriate for like tech related and business books and marketing to some degree. Those go really well, but we've done it with fitness books, and you get a ton of traffic from Product Hunt. So that's just one example of a market channel, kind of going back to what we talked about, that you would have wanted to identify early and known what your strategy and your implementation was going to be during pre-launch. You want to know
that again, so I can link it up in the notes.
It's producthunt.com.
Product Hunt.
It's just one example. Others will be like Reddits and Reddit sub channels. There's a ridiculously popular, pretty much for any topic, you'll find a group of people on Reddit who are really into it. And again, if you're able to kind of seed that early, being able to share, some Reddits won't let you share books, and that's fine. But oftentimes you can do something. You might be able to share a blog post, or you might be able to share a link to the book. And again, if you put in a little bit of work to kind of plant the seeds there, you'll be allowed to, and it'll be great. It's a great lead generator. Then we want to look at things like Facebook groups where it's appropriate. What are the business, if you're again in a business book or something like that, what are the business groups you're a part of? Maybe you want to ask the admin and say, hey, is it okay if I share this book here? It just came out. And the same goes for fiction and stuff like that. The same goes for any type of book, is figuring out which is the research you've already done. And that's when you want to hit those channels, is usually day 4, 5, 6, and hit those hard. At the same time, everything that should be happening right now, you should have blog podcasts going live, because you've arranged these weeks and months before, ideally. Okay. So I know there's probably going to be the odd person out there who's like, my book is ready right now. What do I do? Now it's a little tougher for launch week, and here's the big asterisk, and here's the important part where we talk about post-launch, and we hitting that 10,000. Podcasts are so important to go live, launch week, launch month. So you start to get that early action. If you look at Tim Ferriss, I call it like the Blitzkrieg method, or the Tim Ferriss method. As soon as he comes out with a book, everybody is talking about it, because he's gotten on every podcast. He's gotten on every blog, and he's done the work of like arranging those. He has the name recognition where it's easy for him to do that now. But guess what? If you find the right fit for your book, it takes a little bit more time and a little bit more effort for you, but you could still arrange these to go live during the launch window.
Well, I mean, I was just going to say that now Tim Ferriss has the mind share. Now he has the recognition, but it's the exact same thing he did. What you're describing, Tom, is the exact same thing he did for his first book, The 4-Hour Work Week. Go into conferences, talking to bloggers, getting them excited, giving them an advance copy, and not just giving them the book and talking about the book, but building the relationship with them and engaging with them based on the ideas in the book. That was a big part of how and why, when that book did come out, it was on the tip of everybody's tongue. And now, of course, he's repeated that strategy. It's one that works. It's the same thing that you're describing here. So it's applicable if you're just starting out or if you already have an existing audience.
Yep. And so the key is always, starting with your audience and using that as a leverage point. So if you don't have an audience, trying to build that audience as big as possible. We've gone from maybe 50, 100 email subscribers to 1,000 or so during our pre-launch stuff when we've done book launches before. And that's enough where we can really move the needle when the book actually launches. So even if you're starting from very little, you can build up that list of people, build up your core audience, which is then the key to leveraging against these other platforms as well. But if you're able to line up podcasts, line them up. If you're able to line up guest posts, line them up. If you're able to line up people to review your book, these are, weeks, months in advance of the book going live, do it. And here's the deal. Here's the real power in this. It's not the first week. It's not even really the first month. It's what happens over the course of the year now. When you have that podcast that's linking back to you and your book sales page that then you control, and then you can link to your Amazon account or wherever you want to link to. You could sell it directly on your website if you want. What's the power of that guest post that went live and is getting traffic every day from that other person's website and coming back to you and pointing to your book? What's the power of that book review that points back to your book sales page, points to the book? What's the power of all these cumulative things that are done? Drip, drip, drip. It compounds. This is long tail marketing. People say that word, but this is like it. It's long tail marketing, because getting on these blogs and podcasts is not going to, maybe if you get, like as an example, you get on Pat Flynn's podcast, I guess, and maybe you get like 1,000 sales or something like that. Maybe, I don't know. You get on some other bigger names and stuff like that. You get tons and tons of sales. You get on Oprah, you get tons and tons of sales. Okay, whatever. I don't look at that as like a strategy. It's awesome if you can line those people up, but the real strategy that you can actually implement, 'cause so much of that is luck. Okay, that's what I'm saying. That's why it's not a strategy. Unless you actually have a relationship, then it can be part of your strategy. But assuming you don't have those relationships, assuming you're kind of starting like a bootstrapper, like I started, probably like Jesse started, like many of the people who have you seen on the Book Business and Brand Building Summit, who are bootstrappers, who started from scratch, who had to work their way. It's these little pieces, blog after blog after podcast, linking back to your site, linking back to your book. That's going to generate sales and sales and sales. And I have, as an example, one book I wrote, I don't know, I think I wrote it like in 2013. It's called The Complete Guide to Pay What You Want Pricing. I still get a check every week for this thing, hundreds of dollars kind of thing. And I'm not going to retire on that money, but man, is that cool to be able to put in that effort up and then continue that effort going forward for maybe about a year. I kept blogging, guest blogging. I kept writing about Pay What You Want Pricing. I kept blogging on my own blog about it. I kept doing podcast interviews about it. And guess what? Not only does that send people back to your site, and so you're getting more traffic and therefore more sales, but now people who read it are like, oh, that's interesting. I want him on my podcast. And it's drip, 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 and it compounds. That's the big thing. People are like, oh, I only got 5 podcast interviews, and just give it time. Like, you have to plant these seeds, and you have to keep planting the seeds. And I would probably give a farming analogy, but I'm not a farmer. But the point is,
I don't know how many farmers we have here, but I will echo that sentiment that like the cumulative effect of doing this work is the real long-term benefit. I'll say that again. The cumulative effect of getting out and saying yes to everything. I can count on one hand the number of podcast invitations or virtual summit invitations that I've said no to. And with each one, there was a very good reason. And it doesn't even really matter what those reasons are, because the majority in almost every case, and now I'm getting 1 to 4 invitations a week to be on podcasts, virtual summits, right? So that adds up quick. And it started from saying yes to the ones that were coming in, as well as getting out and proactively getting in front of other people and putting yourself out there as an available guest for their shows, or somebody who can write a guest post on their blog, or somebody that can be a speaker on their summit. And success breeds success, right? Once you get out there enough, then people see you or hear you and say, oh, I heard you on this. Maybe you can be on that episode, or on that podcast. And I'm just thinking back to the Jordan Harbinger interview we did a couple of days ago, of course, with the Art of Charm podcast, now one of the top 50 podcasts overall. You don't start at that level, right? And as he was saying, over the course of doing dozens of interviews, you cut your chops to the point where you can realistically get on one of those shows and deliver and be a compelling guest. And then that's the icing on the cake. It's not the cake itself. Getting on those big shows is the result of putting in that groundwork. So just wanted to echo what you're saying on that point, Tom.
It's the compound effect. You know, Darren Hardy wrote that book. Another one I love is the same angle, came out way earlier, is The Slight Edge. Jeff Olson, like, I love that book and I kind of live by it. And it's the little things we do every day that make the biggest difference in the end, because a little positive, doing one positive thing every day doesn't mean much today. It doesn't mean much tomorrow. The day after that, it probably doesn't mean much. And I can go on and on and on. It probably doesn't mean much. But all of a sudden you look back and you're like, wow, after 2 years, now look at my platform. And I know we were just talking about this earlier today, Jesse, about the list you built around publishing and stuff like that. And how, like, for the first couple of years, it was like, oh, you'd only got an X number. And now all of a sudden in the course of a couple of weeks, you just hit that number. And it's like, you couldn't have done that though, if you had not started the way you did, which is drip, 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 building that platform.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely right. I ran a summit. Only one other summit I've ever run was the Lifestyle Entrepreneur Summit in 2014 when my book was coming out in the US. And I think 700 some people joined that summit, which at the time I was like, wow, it's amazing. 700 people are engaging with this idea that I have. I'm happy to share that we're at 10 times that number of people, with give or take just a few. You know, we're close to like 7,000 people taking part in the Book Business and Brand Building Summit. And I just want you to know that that's, you know, almost 2 years later from doing this the last time. And it's an incremental approach. If you're in this for the long haul, and as most authors should be, because a book has an infinite shelf life, then it's always in your best interest to continue to build. And I'm just going to turn it back over to you.
No, I love
Don't want
it.
to steal your thunder.
But it's great. I love it. And so I will say that's the big thing. And that's kind of the secret. It doesn't seem like much of a secret, but like, that's the secret behind Tim Ferriss. You know, it's the secret behind every big recognizable name, is you'll see these years of hustle that have accumulated over time. And so that's not to like discourage you, but to encourage you, because no matter where you're starting, you can start building that. You can start building that empire. You can start building that, you know, that castle or whatever kind of analogy you want, but you want to start building it, and it takes one brick at a time. So the big thing is going forward. Like, that's the thing, is if your topic is legitimately interesting to people, if you have a good angle on it, you know, and again, this is very specifically to nonfiction. We can probably talk about if people are in the audience or fiction writers, we talk a little bit, how do we apply this to that? But I will speak very directly to the platform crowd, to the people who are here about the, you know, really interested in the business aspect of the Book Business and Brand Building Summit and the brand part. But those two people, and this is the thing, is you want to look for every instance where you can talk about your book, blogs, podcasts, anything. You want to continue to write about your book. So you want to keep getting those links back to your sales page, back to your website, where you can then, and you also getting more advanced. You want to do things like create a drip sequence when people opt in to your email list, that you're letting them know about this book, that it exists. I like to do courses for this reason. Like, I have a free course on Pay What You Want pricing. And then I say, hey, by the way, not only did I, you know, it's a free course to teach you about the Pay What You Want pricing, but then at the end, I'm like, hey, if you want to pay what you want for this book, and it's, you know, not to be clever or anything like that, but it's effective because I'm able to get people in because it's free, no barrier to entry. And then I drip out a bunch of great content, and then a percentage of them go and buy the book, because while I've given a lot away, they want all of it. They want it in like all the detail. And yeah, you know, I won't say that that's like the end all be all strategy. It's just one example of a way where, by just driving traffic back to my website, driving traffic back to that free course, driving people back to that sales page, is continuing to perpetually pay me. And it's really cool. And you do that enough. And as an example, you know, Steve Scott, I think you mentioned, and some of the other like fiction authors who, when they write a lot of books, that's kind of what they're doing. And they're just sending people from one book to another book, and it feeds into it. So if somebody liked a book by, you know, a fiction author, they're going to go see what the rest of the books are out by him or her. So then they go and buy that one. They buy the next one. And if you have a platform, you can do the same thing. You can drip it out. You can remind people about a new book or an older book that's kind of back catalog for you. And you can create these drip sequences that automate this. So I'm a big fan of automation where you can, and worry about automation in the beginning at all, in my opinion. Like, just bootstrap it, work your butt off, get everything squared away. Once you actually have traction, you're getting people coming back to you. That's when you look at, how do I automate this process? How do I maybe drip out on social media once a week, or a few times a month or something like that. Where do I kind of automate this process to kind of keep linking back to this or keep reminding people of this? Maybe in my drip sequence, my email autoresponder sequence, whatever it might be. That's when you look at automation. And when you start automating, then you can truly scale. And so literally in the course of 12 months, I don't think it's insane to say hit 10,000 and be in the top 1%. Because guess what? Most authors aren't doing what I just told you. And that sets you apart. And that gives you these, honestly, I'll leave it at that.
Well, I just want to point out that for anybody that hears the word automation or drip feeding and starts to get freaked out because you don't know what that means, just think of it as, an email that's going out that you don't have to write. And that's the way to scale. I mean, anybody that's registered for this summit got an email right away that said, welcome, here's some information about the summit, here's what to expect. You also got an email about 4 minutes later that said, hey, what's your number one question about building your book-based business and brand? And in that case, so that was a drip feed, that was a sequence like Tom's was describing, but then you always have the chance to jump in. And I've responded to hundreds of those emails personally. And it's the combination of automation with personal touch that I think is really the key differentiator in building, a really good reputation and brand online, without having to do all of the work and send every single email personally firsthand yourself.
Subscribes. Yeah. Can you imagine? So these are the cornerstones of it. And that's how you get to 10,000, is a little bit at a time, is a few sales. If you do the math, I guess I could pull it up, but all you're looking at to hit 10,000 in a year is, I think something like 30. Yeah. It's like 27 sales a day for a book that's under $10, especially an ebook. You can hit that. That's 30 a day. I mean, as a percentage of traffic that you need, I would assume that 1 to 5% of people who would come to a page might buy. You realize you don't actually need a ton of people. Like you just need the right people. You need the right audiences coming in. So if you have a book in marketing, maybe that shouldn't be guest posting on a mom blog or a DIY blog. But if you approach the right outlets, they're going to send the right traffic, and it will be perpetual. Yeah,
and I'll insert one other thing that I've done that's been successful for driving book sales ongoing is like so I'll put out a free offer. Like I have a 4-part video training series I call bestsellerthisyear.com. And you go there because you want the video training series on how to create a book and get it out there. Great. On the thank you page, once somebody registers, I have a short video that says, hey, thanks so much. Check your email in a moment. But before you do, if you get a copy of my book, Lifestyle Entrepreneur, then I'm happy to share this additional training and bonus with you. So if you can always be in a situation where you're stacking additional benefits or value in exchange for every ask that you have of your audience, then you can stair step up beyond just getting registrations and then book sales. But then I say, if somebody does buy a copy of my book and forwards the receipt, then I'll say, look, hey, once you've had a chance to read it, if you leave a review, I'd be happy to jump on a 20-minute call with you and just really dive into whatever is the most pressing issue you're facing building your business and brand, and so on and so forth. Now you're in an actual relationship with a potential customer on the tail end of building your list and driving book sales. And I think, that's part of what Tom's talking about here, of just looking at it as a numbers game. If you've got a couple good free offers and you have just a basic sequence that sells your book on the back end of those, you can focus all of your effort to getting out there, getting on more media, doing more things that bring attention to what you're doing overall. And then the call to action at the end, when people are like, how do we find out more about you? That's where you send them into the front end of these campaign sequences, as they're called.
I love it. So here's another thing I'm going to say too, in terms of like hitting that 10,000 ongoing and building and growing from there, is just, there's a lot of, this is like the fundamental structure. Like this is how, what we just discussed is the way to get there. And there are things that you do that might expedite certain aspects of it. That might be like a growth hack, or it might be a way to like get extra sales or something like that, whether it's like, a lucky break, which is we can't plan for. So it doesn't really, I never put that as part of my strategy. If there's no path to it, direct path, then it's not a strategy. If in the context of like getting somebody like famous to share your book, not, again, if you're just relying on luck, not a strategy. But in terms of like strategic things you can do and kind of getting more to the tactical level or technique level, or like little tips and tricks and things like that. We just worked for Ash Maurya's books, Scaling Lean. One of the things we did was kind of methodically approach the 5,000 pre-orders. And we had worked on that for a year leading up to the launch of methodically getting pre-orders for a book. And that was, he had a great platform to begin with, number one. Number two, then it was a matter of taking that platform and saying, well, how do we get people to put money down for a book that doesn't come out for a year or come out for months? It's a tough thing. So then that's where you can kind of get clever and you start thinking, well, how do you move the needle on something like this if you're looking for pre-orders? So I'm going to give an example of pre-orders, and then I'll talk about maybe, once something's on a sale, how do you do more interest? So in his case, one of the big drivers was doing events where he'd do an in-person event, and then anybody who signed up and bought got a pre-order of the book. It came with the package. Or did online bundles. We did bundles as an experiment, and you've probably seen everybody online do that if you paid attention to it. I mean, I know Lewis Howes did it. I've seen, we've done it for our books. Almost every book I've worked on to some degree is bundling stuff. So saying, hey, if you pre-order the book, you also get X, Y, and Z. And if you pre-order, 3 or 4 books, you get this. If you pre-order 10 books, you get this. And looking at how you can bundle multiple books. And then if we're talking about kind of going forward, stuff that kind of moves the needle is also doing similar stuff is, can I do some sort of event where people get the book in conjunction? If I'm doing a speaking engagement, which could really come out of a good book, one of the things I'm going to request is that they buy X number of copies for the whole audience. And that's going to be part of the agreement to bring you on stage. And it's not that hard. It's not as hard as it sounds if you've never done it before. Because once you kind of get established, you realize that's kind of part and parcel really with the speakers. Is in more cases than not, you should be able to get people to buy bulk of your book to speak on stage. And that's a whole nother thing. But that's another way to kind of boost sales there. Other ways is to do bundles, like ongoing bundles, like where you maybe put your book. Oh, go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah, I want to jump in on a point because what you're talking about. How do you coordinate bulk book buys? And it's a great strategy because it doesn't have to be a one-by-one game. Like when you're sending people to an opt-in funnel and you're giving away a free resource and then ultimately asking them to buy your book, then it's just a volume game of how many total people can you send there. But the other side of that game is what Tom's talking about now is how do you coordinate pre-orders and ideally in wholesale or bulk quantities so that those orders actually drop on the launch date. And I'll share with everybody here the site called thelifestyleentrepreneur.book.com. Thelifestyleentrepreneur.book.com is now, it's a little outdated because it was for my book launch a couple of years ago. But as you go there, you can see that I said, look, if you buy 5 copies of my book, then you'll get this. If you buy 10, then you'll get this, this, and this. If you buy 20 copies, you get free access to a training event that I was running called Business in the Weekend at the time. And so now all of a sudden you're pricing your products, your experiences, the other things that you do that ultimately play into your business and brand in terms of books. And then that is what really moves the needle when it comes to the book launch taking place, because now you've got commitments for, sometimes dozens of books per person because they want this other auxiliary experience that they can get. It's a part of that. So I linked that up, but that's another good strategy that I wanted to give some context to that Tom's talking about here.
Yeah, I love it. And it's great. And I remember I spoke to Honore before and I had her on my podcast and she talked about white labeling books. And that's a whole different ball game. Super cool. But there's a lot of creative stuff you can kind of get into in terms of like when you get to that point, you have a book, it's established, people have written positive reviews about it, you're getting sales. Then it's a matter of like, how do I get to the next level? And there's a lot of, and then that's what you do. You're just looking for opportunities. How do I sell maybe more than one book at a time? Like it's always great to go, one, from a platform to many and get many people to buy one book. But you realize actually pretty quick, actually some of the most effective ways to sell books is bulk orders, is getting people to order 50, 100, 200, 1,000 at a time. And there's different strategies for that or different techniques and how to approach that. But ultimately it comes down to, again, is the book a good fit for whoever's ordering? But the big thing is when it comes to bulk orders, you're usually looking at schools will buy bulk orders, colleges, high schools, companies will buy bulk orders, events will buy bulk orders. What else? Those are the main ones. So like, that's what you want to be thinking.
Possibly book clubs. So like, say you're in a subgenre of, fiction or science fiction fantasy or whatever that may be. If you're not directly in this like, nonfiction and personal development and help space, that's very clearly how to, maybe you build relationships with book clubs and say, hey, let's coordinate you guys getting, 150 copies of the book or 500 copies of the book for the people that are part of your book club. And then you as the author offer yourself to do either a narrated reading or do a Q&A and make yourself available to supplement the fact that they're getting a bunch of copies of your book and sharing it within their community.
Ooh, I love that strategy. That's great. I don't think I've ever used that before, but I love the idea. If you're able to connect with these, I mean, it's a no-brainer, right? Book clubs need books to read. And if you can offer a discount, of course you're going to go to the top of the line, I love that idea. So that's the big thing, is always keeping your eyes open for opportunities to not only do, one-off sales, which is great. And then when we talk about automation and autoresponders and stuff like that, so that they continue to perpetually come in, but that you're also looking for opportunities to do bulk. And that's the biggest thing. Like, you can, all of a sudden it becomes way easier to sell 10,000 books if you're doing a bulk orders of 100 at a time. How many times do you need that to happen? Not that many, right? It's a lot easier. So those are kind of the main things. I guess I'll leave it at that, because at this point now, I guess, Jesse, you can ask what questions you have, or if the audience has any questions, I think we can dig into it, because I don't want to go off into a tangent that's not most important, I think, to the audience right now. So I'll leave it at that and say that's kind of how you get to 10,000.
I mean, that's pretty darn good. It's very comprehensive. You don't have to do every single thing that Tom just outlined, but I want you to take away from that, that ultimately, if you just choose a few strategies that feel in line with your personality, the genre of book that you're writing, and execute on those consistently over time, that's really what it comes down to. There's no magic bullet. We can always say, oh, if I was just on Entrepreneur on Fire and the episode came out the same week that my book comes out, well, it's great if you can get it, but that's putting a lot of eggs in one basket. Whereas if you're on 25 different podcasts and they're staggering and coming out over time, then you're getting, I think of this as like, I don't know if it's the right term, but like crowd control or mind share. And when you're just out there consistently and everywhere you look, all of a sudden you're like, wow, he's on that podcast and there's in that blog, and I heard this person talking to him. It builds this effect that lets you rise above the noise. And that's when people start really paying attention. And then they become part of your community, part of your audience. And that's really the goal. That's what's going to get you to that 10,000 book sales number, as opposed to, looking for that one big smash hit opportunity. And it's the same mentality of like people that play the lottery. Like, it's just not going to happen. And honestly, a lot of research shows that even if you do win the lottery, people end up blowing all that money anyway. So if you play the long game and build your name in the industry, build your reputation, get out there, then, it starts to add up over time. So let's see what is coming in. Yeah, if anybody has questions for Tom, you have an opportunity now to ask them. Go ahead and make sure you're logged into the chat and that you ask them in there. And, other than that, Tom, do you have any other thoughts on, like, after the book launch is over, and let's say it's a few months later, what is it that's continuing to drive those sales, maybe in addition to what you've already mentioned? And then I'll share a tip of mine as well.
Yeah. So like one of the easiest ways is a paid marketing channel. If you just need a boost in sales, it doesn't always work out. We've done thousands and thousands in paid marketing for books, and books have such a small margin. It's tough gig, but there are a lot of book promotion sites that will share your book at a discount, right? Usually pay like $20, $50 or $100 or something like that. BookBub is a great example, and they can generate hundreds of sales. The challenge though is because it costs so much money, and the result is usually, it's usually good, but because your book is usually discounted, maybe at like 99 cents or a couple of bucks, you're actually not making much money. Say this is a strategy for like directing traffic to Amazon. You're actually not going to make much money from that. So it's one of those things we actually put into play intermittently, usually like maybe quarterly or maybe twice a year, to do a kind of, and do that around also other types of marketing. So like we have that go live at the same time. We do some quick, like an email campaign to say, hey, this is live and it's discounted right now, go grab it. And we discount the price of the book maybe for like a few days or something like that. And what's nice about that is it'll create a spike in sales that you may or may not break even on the sales because of what you're investing in it. But usually what happens in Amazon is that if you do create that spike, you get up to the bestseller rank again. If you aren't, you hit that #1 spot, and it creates this kind of effect where you kind of you can maintain it easier. and because you're already up there. And then all of a sudden it's, again, all you're doing is just giving a spike, a little jolt, and then it, maybe it'll come back down to equilibrium. But it's one of those things you can do as a very small way. You can kind of plan for this once, twice, maybe 3 or 4 times a year, something like that, to kind of do a discount giveaway, discount relaunch is what I call it. And you can do that as big as you want. You can do it off maybe paying a couple sites, maybe do an email, or you can do a more concerted effort where maybe you line up some other people to share about it. Again, anytime anybody's driving email traffic your way is a really good thing. So that's just one example of ways to kind of generate extra sales.
Yeah, that's a good point, because you want to like build up as much anticipation and crowd control for your book launch. But then a few months later, it's totally valid to knock the price down and do a re-promotion. And you can wash and rinse and repeat that a number of times. One of our biggest supporters on the Book Business and Brand Building Summit, a good friend of mine, Matt Stone, who founded Buck Books, which actually we, Lifestyle Entrepreneurs Press, was the first featured publisher there. Meaning every time we have a book launch that comes out, we give them a heads up. And then if we're doing a book launch that's a 99-cent day, then they'll also blast it out, because they have an audience of over 50,000 people that are expecting to get 99-cent book deals every day, right? So if you can coincide with some of these marketing companies that focus specifically on authors and their books, and if you're willing to cut your price for a period of time, then you will drive a lot more units. And just something like that is good for anywhere from 150 to 300 plus book sales. When Buck Books does a blast out and we knock the price of one of our books down to 99 cents. So in the grand scheme of things, okay, if you're getting like 35% of that from Amazon, whether or not you're working with a publisher, maybe you make $100 from that day. But what does happen is it shoots your book back up the charts. Then you raise it back to normal price. And now you've got a book back at the top of the charts with a lot more visibility on it, and a renewed lease on life for the next little while. So that's a good strategy. Not to mention, if you've got the rest of your business starting to get dialed in, when you do a relaunch or a re-promotion at a discount on your book, who cares about the $100 you're making in the actual book sales royalties, instead of the fact that now 250, 300 new people have your book in their hands. And some percentage of those people are going to want to self-select into the other things that you have available. And some of them will just read the book and enjoy it. And some of them may buy it for 99 cents because it's a deal and never even read it. It's all good. So you want to be able to cater to all those people with your ongoing promotions. And one question we have for you, Tom, is, let's say you have a launch date that's X, and you can pick any date. How long beforehand do you start? When is day one? If you're looking out to a launch date at some point in the future, what does that time frame actually look like, just in weeks and months?
I mean, ideally, I would say it's probably like 6 months out would be kind of ideal. I'd say minimum 3 months out. I think starting any earlier than 3 months out, here's the deal. Then you can't effectively recruit influencers and stuff like that to share, promote. You can't effectively get on podcasts most of the time, or in a lot of cases, because people just have their editorial calendars locked down. A lot of podcasts are set up, not all, but a lot are, planned months ahead of time. Same with blog content.
Yeah. And so that's another good expectation to have, is the higher you're aiming, the longer your time frame. I personally made invitation videos for the bigger names that we had on this summit, and sent those out in like early February. Okay. Now here we are at the end of June, because I know that somebody like a Marisa Murgatroyd or somebody like a Jordan Harbinger thinks in terms of months and even over a year, and quite literally has things on the calendar, has their own internal launches, promotions and stuff scheduled. If you're trying to edge in on somebody who already has an existing business that's pretty prolific, then you got to be able to look out months and months into the future and start that process early. So yeah, I'd say 6 months is a realistic time frame. And of course, the longer, the better. So what do you say, Tom? You have any other parting words of wisdom here for the authors, the entrepreneurs on the summit as we begin to bring this to a close?
Just be cognizant of opportunities to promote and market your book, and plan as early as possible. So again, 3 months minimum, 6 months is a little bit better. If you're starting to write the book, now is the time, and actually be planning while you're writing. Hey, what am I going to be able to, how can I repurpose portions of my book as blog posts or guest blog posts? Can I start building those relationships now as I'm writing the book, who I know will be interested in this? Things like that, they're going to go a long way, and it takes some concerted effort. And I would just say, for the person who has a book out that's not selling very well, just understand that it's you have to drip. It's the compounding interest, drip, drip, drip. So look at ways that you could buy the book. Look at what podcasts you can get featured on. Look at what blogs you can get mentioned on, and search for ways to get people to be talking about your book, to get your book in kind of front of audiences where it's appropriate, and start that conversation. So, and obviously don't lose hope. Like, it's tough, but you got to keep at it.
Yeah, man. I mean, there's ups and downs and all arounds in this stuff. One day something can be going great and you got a promotion that's working, and then you got somebody over here that hates you, and you're always just somewhere in the middle, right? So I guess my final advice on, how to really sell 10,000 copies of your book is, don't get so married to the day-to-day, moment-to-moment of what's happening, and instead keep that longer-term perspective of, hey, the people that are really going to like you and appreciate what you're doing, they're not going to be so concerned about what so-and-so says over here and what happened over there, whether it's positive or negative. They're more interested perhaps in how you adapt, react, respond over time, and more importantly, what you have to say and share from your own first-person perspective, which is, of course, why they're following you and engaging with you to begin with. So, with that, I want to give a big thanks and a personal shout out to Tom, who not only is on as one of our live presenters, but has also been working feverishly behind the scenes, quite literally for months, just like we've been talking about, for months, to get everything lined up to make this summit a well-attended, successful event that hopefully, well, I know not even hopefully, that has reached and helped thousands of people. So for that, thank you, Tom. And for everybody else, join me tomorrow. We're going to have the closing keynote presentation for the Book, Business, and Brand Building Summit, 2 p.m. Pacific. You're not going to want to miss this. I'm going to pull out all the stops, and I'm going to share what I call my 10-step process to become at least an Amazon bestseller, but also to really leverage and build your own business and brand. So you've heard a lot of other people's perspectives, you heard a lot of other people's expertise and guidance, and now you're going to hear it straight from me. And we're also just going to take a moment to celebrate. I know some of you have been attending just about every single live event. Whether or not you guys have a job, I mean, I appreciate the fact that you're showing up here day after day. I don't take that lightly. And I just look forward to bringing the heat tomorrow, giving you guys hopefully the most valuable hour and a half or so of your month and year. Not to denigrate anybody else that's been on the summit, but obviously I want to try and set a high bar for all of you guys that have been joining me and supporting what we've all been doing on this summit. So that's what you got to look forward to. Tom, I'll let you say a final parting word, and then we will close this down.
Thank you, Jesse. I'll just say, if you're interested in more of what I do and kind of our strategies, implementations of product launches or book launches, if you go to tommorkes.com, it's TOMMORKES.com. I'm trying to prep some new case studies on some of the bigger launches we've done. So those will hopefully be coming out soon, but I already have a ton of stuff on there. You'll be able to see links to some of the bigger launches we've done and how we've done it. And there's also a bunch of free courses. So go to tommorkes.com, tons of free material, lots of pay what you want stuff as well. That makes it hopefully accessible to everybody. And I just want to say thank you, Jesse, for letting me be a part of this. It was a great time speaking. I also love being on the behind the scenes to see how this all comes together and see the magic that's happening right now. I love it. And I will definitely be attending tomorrow's event. And I encourage everybody listening, show up tomorrow. Jesse's the man. He knows what he's talking about. So definitely mark that on your calendar and definitely show up. I'll be there as well. Awesome. Thanks, Tom. And everybody that's watching this, get on Tom's radar. I mean, if you've got a book coming out, try and get on his calendar, because the guy is doing this day in and day out with quite literally, as you've heard, some of the biggest names, people doing New York Times bestsellers launches and most successful crowdfunding campaign that may have ever taken place. And he's got a humility about him
you know, there he is in a ball cap with a bookshelf behind him, but doing big things in the world. So, you know, shout out. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, everybody. We will see you tomorrow for the closing keynote of the Book, Business, and Brand Building Summit. This has been a wild ride. When it's all over, I'm going on vacation. But before that happens, join us tomorrow. Take care. I'll see you soon.